And welcome to the second episode of CCBH Chats. My name is Denise Dickerson, and I am a licensed therapist as well as the clinical supervisor for Calvert Crisis Response. Calvert Crisis Response is a multidisciplinary program aimed at providing immediate de-escalation, stabilization, treatment, and resources for all manner of behavioral health crises, including domestic violence and sexual assault. These resources can be accessed at 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, by contacting our hotline to either activate our mobile crisis team or come into our centrally located office here in Prince Frederick at the health department. If at any point during this live stream you feel the need to talk to someone, please feel free to reach out to Calvert Crisis Response at 1-877-467-5628. If you are in immediate danger or experiencing a medical emergency, please call 911. I'm sitting here today, though, with Erin Wilkins, who is also a licensed therapist and our clinical supervisor for Calvert Center for Change, Calvert County's only comprehensive domestic violence and sexual assault program. Erin, thanks for being here with me.
Thank you for having me.
So October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so on this episode of CCBH Chats, we're going to discuss domestic violence, what that actually is, and the resources that are available here. For our audience, please remember to submit any questions that you may have in the comments section, as we're going to monitor that and be responding to them later on throughout the stream. So Erin, let's start with, what is domestic violence? I think a lot of people have some questions about what that actually is.
Sure. So domestic violence, which is also sometimes called intimate partner violence or IPV, is really a pattern of behavior that is used to gain and maintain control over the other intimate partner. So contrary to the name, I know the name domestic violence or intimate partner violence, but contrary to the name, there doesn't actually have to be any physical violence for it to be considered a domestic violence relationship.
So it sounds like there could be a lot of different kinds of domestic violence.
Yes, absolutely. So there's about 6 different types of violence or abuse that is kind of involved in domestic violence. So I don't know if you want to go through one by one or how you want to do it.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Sure. So let's just start with physical. That's probably what people, I think of the most when they think of domestic violence. So physical can include pushing, hitting, strangulation has recently become a felony in Maryland. Strangulation is part of that. Trapping somebody in their home or isolating them to where they can't leave. If they're injured, they can't get medical help. All of that is really considered physical violence. And I'm sure, people can use their imagination as to how far physical violence can go.
Okay. So what other types of domestic violence are there other than physical violence?
So probably the next most common would be emotional. So emotional can be like name calling, insulting someone, jealousy. Again, isolation can be emotional because it's really tough for people to be isolated. It's really hard on their mental health.
When you're saying isolating, is that like isolating people from like family or friends?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be anybody. So it can be, if we're talking physical violence, it can literally be locking somebody in a house so that they can't leave. But it's also about that power and control is about taking them away from people that could possibly help them. Okay. So you're isolating them from friends, family, other types of relationships, making them feel as if they're alone and there's really nobody to reach out to.
Okay.
Withholding affection is another common type of emotional abuse. And then threats and just kind of controlling behavior in general is also emotional.
All right. So you mentioned there's other types. There's 6 types altogether. So that's physical, we got emotional, and then what are the other ones?
So sexual is unfortunately something that happens in domestic violence relationships. So that could be forcing your partner to do sexual acts that maybe they're not comfortable with. That can include rape. And honestly, one that people don't think of a lot is accusing the partner of cheating on you. That's a common one that we see with sexual abuse.
I don't think anyone would have really have thought of that as a form of sexual abuse or
Yep.
domestic violence.
It absolutely is.
Okay.
And yet that also part of that could be controlling what the person wears. Maybe you want them to wear, be covered from head to toe, or maybe you want them to dress provocatively. So kind of controlling what they wear and when they wear it and things like that can also be sexual abuse.
Okay. All right. So what are the last three?
So economic or financial is a big one. Controlling somebody's money can really change what they're able to do. So maybe the partner who uses violence may use the other person's money to pay all their bills. Maybe they have control over the person's money. They don't let them leave because you have to have money to do basically everything. So just having that control over the person's finances and money is another type. And maybe you don't allow them to work, or maybe you make them work 80 hours a week and the other partner doesn't work at all. So there's lots of different aspects of financial and economic abuse.
Okay. Any others?
Psychological, which I think can kind of be similar to emotional, but we think of this as like somebody playing mind games with you. Like maybe they use fear, intimidation, threats to harm you, and also isolation could probably be considered psychological abuse as well.
Okay. What about stalking?
Yep, stalking is actually the last one. So that's really a way that people kind of harass you, or they may scare you or use intimidation. They may follow you to work. If you say you're going to be shopping at TJ Maxx, maybe they go to TJ Maxx and see if your car's in the parking lot. It could be repeated calls, text messages, emails, that kind of thing. And then one I think people don't think a lot about is like sending gifts, like constantly sending gifts to somebody or sending them flowers or anything like that, where you're really just kind of constantly in that person's face is really.
Yeah, I don't think that we think of those types of things in terms of stalking. I think it's more of the negative connotations versus trying to constantly be in their presence with gifts and things of that nature.
I think social media too, because a lot of people put where they are, what they're doing on social media, which can open up kind of a whole can of worms, which I know you can, block people on social media. But I think with that, especially and with technology, there's so many ways to sort of find out where someone is, which is a little bit scary, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So how common is domestic violence? I mean, we have a whole month that we are trying to spread awareness about that. And that to me seems to say that this is a common problem.
Yep, it actually is very, very common. So the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence reports that there are more than 20,000 calls placed every single day to domestic violence hotlines across the country.
Oh my gosh, that's so many.
Yes. So 20,000 is a lot. And then they also report that about 20 people per minute are physically abused, which relates to or ends up being something like 10 million people per year.
Wow.
Yep. And then as far as severe intimate partner violence, they have reported that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience what they consider to be severe intimate partner violence. So I would imagine that, whatever they're considering to be severe, things that aren't so severe are probably even more prevalent.
So this is not just something that affects women.
No, not at all.
And, those stats, unfortunately, are incredibly shocking. But I guess what I worry about is we always kind of, I think of domestic violence as an issue that only affects women. Mm-hmm. So does that mean, what is the likelihood that a man is going to seek out treatment or get help for domestic violence?
So I think it's interesting because I attend a lot of different meetings and webinars and things like that. And that's one of the things that I've noticed myself is a lot of the verbiage is really, it seems to be, the thought is that it's men perpetrating this violence against women. And it's actually not that way at all. I think that men are probably less likely to reach out for help because there's the stigma associated with being a male victim of domestic violence, for one.
Yeah.
There's the fear that they may not be believed. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, these male messages that we hear that men can't cry, men can't, they have to be tough all the time. And I think that really may be sort of a barrier to prevent men from reaching out for help.
Sure. What about other populations? I was just thinking about same-sex partners. Is domestic violence an issue with that type of population?
Yes. Absolutely. So I don't know how many people that have done any kind of research on domestic violence, but there's a Duluth power and control wheel that talks about the different types of violence. And there's actually, it's so prevalent in the LGBTQ plus community that they've created sort of a separate power and control wheel about the things that happen in those relationships. So it's absolutely just as prevalent, if not more so. One of the things that that community really has to worry about is things that like you and I probably wouldn't have to worry about. So being outed to people that may not know what our sexuality is,
Right.
discrimination, stigma around that, it really comes with a whole other set of barriers, but it absolutely is just as prevalent in those communities.
So a whole other set of factors and consequences
Yes.
that can come along with that, but are also ways to exert power and control.
Yes, absolutely. So that one, and I actually was in a meeting earlier today where they talked about somebody's status of whether or not maybe they have HIV or AIDS, that being revealed to people is another way to gain and maintain power and control over people.
Sure, sure. So how do relationships become abusive?
Anybody can be an abuser and anybody can be abused. I really believe that abuse is a decision. Again, it's used to gain and maintain power and control over people. I think most people know what it's like to be in those beginning stages of a relationship where maybe there's a red flag, but you know, you're so kind of enamored with this person that maybe you ignore it. But typically abusers can be very charming. That's part of the different sort of phases of abuse that I think we'll talk about in a little bit. But there's something called a honeymoon phase where everything is fine and everything's calm and wonderful. And then all of a sudden, maybe here comes a red flag and here comes another red flag. And the next phase of that is what they call tension building. So maybe there's arguments that are happening and then it usually escalates into whatever the incident is. So it's very easy to, I think, to kind of miss those red flags in the beginning of a relationship. But again, it's all about trying to gain and maintain power over that person.
So why would somebody stay in a relationship like that? I mean, why wouldn't someone just leave something like that where they know that they're being abused?
So that's actually the most common question that I get. And I think that comes from people saying, oh, if that happened to me, I would just get up and walk away. And it's really, really not that simple. And in fact, leaving is the most dangerous time in an intimate partner violence relationship. And if there's a firearm present, the risk actually goes up by like 500% or something crazy.
Yeah.
So it really is the time where the person, the victim or survivor, is at the most risk of being killed.
Sure.
But actually, it's the National Domestic Violence Hotline has a really great website, which we may be able to link later. But they actually have an article where they outline 50 reasons why people don't leave. So part of that is, what if it's somebody that is financially abusive and you have nowhere to go? You have no money to get a hotel. You have no place to live. They've isolated you from your family. So you may be facing homelessness. If you don't have an advocate, again, if they've isolated you from your family, who's going to be there to support you? I mean, it's a really hard decision for somebody to leave. And there's just a ton of different factors. So homelessness, that fear, what if they've threatened you and you believe that threat? I mean, you never can tell if somebody's really going to act on something they've said that they're going to do.
Sure.
So financial instability, shame, fear, and then of course, if you have children, I think that, especially with your abuser, I think that makes it even more complicated to try to leave.
Yeah, and I think too that, you know, when you see patterns of that, and like you said, that control, I think that makes that really difficult. But I often wonder too, and I think that we see this and hear this very often, especially as therapists, is why do people go back to their abuser? Like, why do they go back and resume those relationships if they've been able to get out of them?
So I think it's the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence that teaches that it actually takes the survivor 7 tries on average to leave the relationship for good. So we've kind of touched on a little bit about why people go back, but if you start to think about all those things we just spoke about, so homelessness, children, fear, but we also touched on earlier how people who use violence in relationships can be very charming and very manipulative. And we have that system where, you know, the incident happens, then we reconcile, and then we go right back into that honeymoon phase where they may believe, you know, the abuser may say, oh, I'm never going to do this to you again. And it's probably really easy to believe that. And I think one of the things that people kind of forget about is that there at one point was love in that relationship.
Sure.
And if you have somebody telling you, oh, I'm never going to do it again, and you still love that person, of course it would be natural for you to want to go back.
Right.
So there's a lot of different factors that contribute to that. And it's one of the things I think in my program that I see is that people will reach out for help, and then they do decide to go back, and that's, you know, their decision, and they should know that we're always here to help if they choose to leave again.
So one of the other things that I think is often a question or that comes into play is, how does domestic violence affect other people, especially within the household? Children is a big thing. So how does domestic violence, witnessing it, seeing, you know, your parents go through that, how does that affect kids?
So it is something like 5 million children every year in the US are exposed to domestic violence. Unfortunately, what happens is it's a very cyclical thing. So if you kind of grow up with that being your environment, it's kind of similar to substance abuse. Like, I think that cycle tends to repeat itself. And unfortunately, that's also what happens with domestic violence. And I know we see, as therapists, we see people and we talk about adverse childhood experiences, which can have a lot of, I mean, I could do a whole thing on that because it's one of my favorite things to talk about. But it really impacts somebody for a lifetime.
Sure.
And I believe that it's 1 in 3 children who report witnessing domestic violence also report that they were abused themselves. And then it's something like half of all children who witness domestic violence try to intervene in some way. So then, of course, you're probably going to have injuries and further issues like that.
Sure. So how do you think, though, that affects the way that those kids may have relationships or teenage relationships? I've seen a lot of literature lately in regards to, I guess, teenage violence and you know, interpersonal relationships. How does that play out?
So I think it goes back to those adverse childhood experiences. And I want to say that most kids who witness domestic violence, unfortunately, it's linked to behavior problems by age 16. So that may, again, the cycle sort of repeats itself. So if you grow up seeing this and thinking that it's normal, the likelihood that you're going to continue that behavior and repeat it yourself is pretty high. I think especially nowadays with social media and with, again, technology, there's a whole other like can of worms for teenagers dating now. And I think it's pretty normal to have like jealousy, because you don't know, if you're young and you've never had what I would call a healthy relationship, you don't know what's normal and what's not normal. So I think jealousy is a big issue. Again, with social media, I think you can sort of track people and see, you know, where they are, and if one of the things that I also think about too is coercion, especially with like young girls sending like naked pictures of themselves and things like that. I think that's can be very like detrimental in a teenage relationship.
Social media has definitely opened up a whole new world in regards to a lot of different issues. So I think it certainly plays a role with the way that they communicate and the way that these relationships begin.
Absolutely.
So you talked a little bit earlier, and it seems to be a theme about red flags. So what are these red flags, or what are these signs and symptoms of domestic violence that one should be aware of or at least know about?
Well, obviously, I mean, the biggest thing would be if there is physical violence, which with the cycle of abuse and the things that we know, typically we know that it won't start out that way. But I would look for things like, does this person make fun of you? Does this person put you down? Do they embarrass you? Do they try to control where you're going and what you're doing? And, maybe you say you're in a new relationship and you say, well, I'm going to go out, and hang out with my girlfriends tonight. And what if they try to put a stop to that? It can start out as things that seem, again, I guess you would say innocent, or something that might seem normal in an early relationship. Because I mean, jealousy is a normal human emotion. And I think it's what you do with that jealousy that determines kind of if it's a bad thing or a good thing, so to speak. But making you feel like you've done something wrong or blaming you, definitely a lot of red flags. And I think if you feel scared about what somebody's reaction is going to be, that's a big red flag. I mean, I can't imagine doing something and having to worry if it's going to make this other person mad. Are they going to threaten to break up with me? Are they going to, take my vehicle and go somewhere and not come home for a couple of days? Substance use can also be, I've seen in a lot of the work that we've done that a lot of domestic violence incidents also happen when there's substances involved. And I think people will use that as an excuse. Oh, I only hit you, or I only did this because I was drunk or I was using, or whatever it is. But that's not an excuse for violence. So there's definitely a lot of little red flags to kind of look out for. And I'm sure if you look on Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence, National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, they all have wonderful websites. And I'm sure there's a ton of resources on the kind of early red flags to look out for.
Okay. So if someone suspects that they are in, or that they know someone that's experiencing domestic violence or in an abusive relationship, what can they do?
I think the first thing is just check on your friends. Like, reach out to somebody. With social media and everything else, I sound like a broken record, but everybody knows everybody's business. So you can easily see if somebody is in a new relationship. And then if you know somebody really well, you're going to notice a behavior change. So check on your friends. Like, we do it at work every day. We talk like, hey, how you doing today? Just following up with people, making sure they're doing all right. If they do decide to confide in you that something's going on, listen to them, believe them, and then offer whatever resources you can find for them. So obviously, our hotline is a great resource, even if you just want to call for other questions. Again, the websites that I mentioned earlier, and I hope we can link them so that everybody can see them, but fantastic resources on there. And just support them as best you can. It's really hard to admit that you're in a domestic violence relationship, and it's really hard especially to tell people that you're close to, because stigma, shame, being embarrassed, all that stuff. So just try to help them in any way you can, and usually that's resources and just being a good friend, listening, trying to help them out.
So are there any local resources that you can tell us about that people could get connected to around here?
Yeah, so absolutely. Our program is one. There are, and this is another thing, even if you're not in Calvert County, Maryland Coalition Against Domestic Violence, or Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence, has a breakdown of every comprehensive sexual assault and domestic violence program all through the state.
Okay.
So even if you're somewhere else and you're watching this, you can get on their website, find that local number, and see what they can do for you. And then of course there's national hotlines as well. But our program, should I share some information about our program?
Well, I think that we should talk about your program.
Sure.
So, Calvert Center for Change, which I think that one of the first things that we should probably talk about is the name, because I think a lot of people are actually more familiar with its former name, which was the Crisis Intervention Center. And it has recently been rebranded as the Calvert Center for Change.
Correct.
So I guess let's start first with talking about what brought about the name change and what does that mean?
So with some movement within the health department, we also have Calvert Crisis Response, which is wonderful, and the Mobile Crisis Team, which is also wonderful. We didn't want anything to get confused, right? I think our main focus in choosing a name was something that would kind of reduce stigma. Some of the things that we have to think about is, if you're in a domestic violence relationship and you come home with a paper that says sexual assault and domestic violence program, it may raise some red flags on that, right?
Sure.
So picking a name that doesn't immediately say, hey, I'm in this domestic violence sexual assault program was really important to me personally. And I think a lot of people felt that way.
I think that causes some safety concerns
Yes,
too.
safety concerns, and the ability to sort of have people not know exactly what what you're getting help for.
Sure.
With mobile crisis team and Calvert crisis response, all different types of substance abuse, mental health crisis, I think it was important to kind of loop in, so we're like sister programs, so to speak, and it ends up working out really well. But our whole point in choosing the name that we did is that we want to encourage everybody in our program to make positive changes in their life. And not only do we serve, I think it's a misconception that we only serve adult female victims of domestic violence or sexual assault, when in reality we have children, males, all different types of people. And one of the things that we do, and I think it's important to touch on this, is our abuser intervention program. So we had to kind of be aware of that when we were choosing a name as well, because you have to think this is a small area. If somebody sees you, you may see somebody that you know at any given time. So walking into, if the name was, domestic violence sexual assault center, that's another kind of people could see.
Sure. People
And
would know what you were going in there
sure.
for.
And
Yeah.
I kind of think of that as a barrier, right? If it was happening to me, I may be a little bit reluctant to kind of have everybody know what's going on.
Sure.
So we tried to pick a name that sort of was
more general.
Yeah, more general.
Something that encompassed all of the populations
Right.
that you were saying.
Right.
Makes sense. So tell us a little bit more about this abuser intervention program and the other programs that Calvert Center for Change offers.
So not only do we have abuser intervention, which again is aimed at increasing the safety of victims of domestic violence. So typically we get referrals through the legal system. So typically the people are legally involved. You can self-refer, so you don't have to be legally involved if you feel like you recognize that maybe you're doing some of these behaviors and you'd like to seek help for it. We absolutely take anybody that would like to come into the program. But it's really aimed at increasing the safety of victims and kind of creating positive change toward nonviolent behavior. So
Hence the name.
Yeah, hence the name. So it's about a 26-week program. It's 1 day a week, and there's a licensed therapist that runs it. So it's really good. I mean, I think we talk a lot about in this field about co-occurring issues. So a lot of those people also are seeking help for substance abuse, mental health, that kind of stuff too. So because we're all the same organization, all your services are sort of in the same place, so to speak.
That's nice. It's a good way to kind of segue into other issues that may have been happening that they may not have had the resources for.
So in addition to abuser intervention, we also have the 24/7 hotline. We have a separate office number, which we can also link below, for just business calls during the day if you're seeking more information and it's not an emergency. We have the 1-877 Calvert crisis response number that people can call 24/7. So within our program, we also offer crisis planning services. So if you are indeed fleeing a domestic violence relationship and you want to just get some education about what domestic violence looks like, if you are interested in creating a safety plan, if you just need somebody to kind of talk to and help you through this process, we have advocates that can help with that. We also have advocacy and accompaniment for protective orders. So we have a law enforcement liaison that can go to court and help you through the process of getting a protective order, which I know is a little bit scary, and it kind of feels like it's a lot. So it's really good to have an advocate that can help you with that. We offer accompaniment to the hospital for sexual assault forensic exams as well. We also offer long-term, short-term, whatever the person's kind of treatment goals are, individual therapy with licensed therapists. And did I miss anything?
I think that you talked about advocacy, you talked about safety planning.
Referrals and resources for like shelters. So there is a domestic violence shelter in Calvert County that we can help, facilitate somebody getting into if they're fleeing a domestic violence situation.
Okay. Good. So it sounds like it's a fairly comprehensive program.
It is.
And people can access those resources 24 hours a day. So at any point, if somebody is looking to get assistance, they can actually access those resources. That's fantastic. So you mentioned a few things about like protective orders and accompaniments. Can you kind of talk about what are the options for people who for someone who is a survivor of domestic violence and what they can do to help themselves, or if they're looking to get assistance, what are those options for them?
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing I would say is call the hotline and we can sort of get you where you need to go. Seeking a protective order is one of the biggest things. It's absolutely something that I recommend because it gives you some legal recourse. And again, we have advocates that can assist with that. Creating safety plans. I want to say it's the National Domestic Violence Hotline has like an interactive safety plan. So you go through piece by piece and they'll ask a question like, who can you call? And you literally input your own information in there. Safety plans can also include like having a bag ready to go that's got your medications, your money, your documents, anything you need. So where if you are in a situation that you need to flee, you can kind of just grab that and go. And just reaching out to any of the resources. Again, if it's not us, if you're not in this county, there are fabulous resources all over the state. But I would say trying to find shelter and getting away from that situation as quickly as you can is what I would recommend.
So I guess one of the questions that I always, get, and I am sure that people always ask, especially with the abuser intervention program, is can abusers change?
Yes, I think that again, we've talked about this earlier, but abuse is a learned behavior. And I mean, that's what therapy tells us, right? Is that people can change and any learned behavior, people can seek help. So abuser intervention is one of the things that people do. Sometimes co-occurring with that, we can do individual therapy. Um, I think it's important to say that the person has to acknowledge their behavior and they have to be willing to change that themselves. I mean, you've seen it, I've seen it. You can want somebody to change, to stop using, to stop doing what they're doing, but they have to want it.
Right.
And I think acknowledging that is the first step.
It's like the old adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you
Yep.
can't make him drink.
Absolutely.
Someone has to be able to acknowledge and be willing to change their behaviors. So I think that's super important to acknowledge that. So I guess, Erin, if we had to close and kind of think about this, you've given us a lot of information, but what would be the one thing that you would want people to know if they were involved in a domestic violence relationship? What's the one thing that you would want to convey out to them?
That there is absolutely help out there that they can reach out to 24/7 when they're ready to do so. That the people, especially with the program that I supervise, the program that you supervise, there's no embarrassment, there's no shame, there's no stigma. This is what we do. This is what we're here for. And I think everybody in my program, your program, really the whole, Calvert County Behavioral Health, we are here to help. And
Absolutely.
that 24/7, give us a call, reach out, and somebody is ready and willing to help you.
I mean, as you said, we're sister programs.
We are.
So I fully and completely echo that sentiment. And I'll just put out the Calvert Crisis Response Hotline again is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you are in a place where you'd like to talk to somebody, you can call 1-877-467-5628. But again, if you are in immediate danger, please make sure that you call 911. So, Erin, I would like to thank you for really just kind of going through and explaining all of domestic violence to us and talking about the resources that are available in Calvert County. I think it's important to really get out all of the information about Calvert Center for Change because it's a very comprehensive program. We're very lucky to have that as part of the Calvert Behavioral Health family. And I think it's a valuable resource to our community. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the second CCBH chat.